Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and I want to welcome you all back to Goosejunkies. It's been a while because we had the Thanksgiving holiday, and we thought that we'd take a little bit of a break just to spend time with our families, but we are glad to be back. And as promised, we're here tonight to talk about dog horror, more specifically, ghost dog horror. And Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark have not quite similar stories, but similar in vein, at least in terms of the subject matter. And tonight we're going to be comparing The Barking Ghost and The Tale of the Hungry Hounds. And we also have a fun discussion later on to talk about. And we're going to talk about our favorite dog media that we, for some reason, have some fondness over. But as usual, we have our recurring panelists here tonight. I want to start off with Goosebumps for Dummies. How are you doing tonight, Goosebumps for Dummies?
I'm doing great. I know I've been absent for a few episodes now, and I'm very glad to be back.
Well, it's good to have you back. Next up, we have Minnesota Goosebumps fan. How are you doing tonight, Minnesota Goosebumps fan? And also, Minnesota and Ultimate Goosebumps man are in another podcast with some really cool folks called Goosebumps Crew. We're also going to plug them in tonight's description as well to give them the shout outs. But anyways, how are you doing tonight, Bruce?
Good. How are you all?
I'm doing great.
I am doing good. I am extremely excited to talk about these two massive steaming piles of rhino shnikes. Can't swear on this channel, but I'm very excited to review these, and I'm going to be leading through the absolute best book of all time, Barking Ghost. So stay tuned.
All right, and next up, I've already mentioned his name, but we have the Ultimate Goosebumps man. How are you doing tonight, Ultimate Goosebumps man?
I'm doing very well tonight. Got some very exciting news about next week's Goosebumps Crew episode. I'm not going to spoil it, but Bruce knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I saw, and I'm really jealous. But I will be tuning in to see that because that's insane to me. And last but not least, we have BD Horror, the man, the myth, the legend himself. How are you doing tonight, BD Horror?
Yo, people of the night. I'm exhausted mostly because of the preparation for this episode, and therefore I came equipped. Got the stick of deodorant, and I got the toilet paper ready to go because this is some major Triceratops doo-doo, in this case canine doo-doo. And let's just say these are 2 dog episodes. I wouldn't mind being euthanized. So be prepared for this episode.
And of course, Spongy444. He's been going through some stuff recently. He cannot make it tonight, but we will have BD Horror as usual read off what Spongy had written to say for the podcast. So, Spongy, you're here in spirit, and we miss you. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into the dog crap. I mean, the Barking Ghost. Bruce, take it away. What is the Barking Ghost about?
The Barking Ghost is a story about a family moving into a new house in this weird, I guess, town in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, it's hard remembering all this stuff because this book is just so boring, but we'll get to that. But he experiences some weird noises coming outside, barking noises, and he eventually meets a girl that I can't even remember her name, that eventually kind of plots away with his brother. Cooper is the main character, guys. Sorry. Cooper and her are trying to conversate, but she is just very weird in his opinion. And she and his brother, I think his name is Mickey, they plot against him to kind of terrorize his life, and it all goes wrong. Cooper whines about it. It's really annoying. And eventually, she even tells him a legend about a barking ghost, which, spoiler alert, turns out to be kind of true, but not in the way you'd expect it. I don't know. I would love to keep going, but completionist, tell me if there's anything I'm missing here.
All right, so first thing, the girl character's name is Fergie, okay? And from what I remember from the story, it's basically like the first half of it is Cooper being like a new kid in this new town, but he lives off like the beaten path. He lives out in the woods. and he hears some barking off in the distance, but there's no neighbors and there's no dogs nearby. So he's like, where's this barking coming from? And he runs into this girl named Fergie after living there for some amount of time. And Fergie ends up like, being weird with him and kind of hostile. And then she gives him some tidbits of information about these barking ghosts, which ends up being plural by the end of it. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't read the book or watched the episode. But it's very weird, like Bruce said. You don't see where this thing is going. And meanwhile, Cooper's going through these pranks with his older brother Mickey. And Mickey is probably one of the biggest douchebag characters in Goosebumps history, right? And you have to deal with that for the first half of the book. And then once you get over that hurdle and you get into the whole changing shed stuff, you know what I mean? It gets very bizarre. And for a lot of Goosebumps fans, this is where the book completely loses them. If the pranks hadn't already done it, it just doubles down on the weirdness. And it has one of the worst endings in Goosebumps history.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that. But that's what I would add to it. I'm going to pass it over to Goosebumps for Dummies. Goosebumps for Dummies. What do you think about the barking ghost?
Sorry. This book was traumatizingly bad. I believe I gave this 1 star on Goodreads. If not, I have to go back and edit that because it truly deserves. Honestly, no stars at all. Why give it a star if it didn't even do a good job? This book follows the Goosebumps formula basically throughout the entire book until like the last few chapters. Fake outs with, his older brother scaring him. Annoying characters, random girl or boy friends character, a mystery going on. It follows all the Goosebumps tropes, and it's extremely unentertaining. There's basically zero entertainment factor. I'm surprised I was able to even get through this book without puking. Well, actually more than once. I did puke around, page 2. Anyways, yeah, this book was pretty bad. There's basically nothing good about it, period, like at all. The episode is like slightly better, but still not much better, since it's, a pretty accurate representation, which is pretty bad.
Very fair points. And I feel like we're getting to the episode in a little bit, so I'm going to pass it back over to Bruce. I don't think we really got what you felt about the Barking Ghost book. What do you have to say about the story, other than what it is?
So, The Barking Ghost, to me, is a book with, honestly, an amazing concept. I mean, don't hate on me, but the title alone is so just, yes, like it feels amazing. The cover leads you in with this great expectation. And even like the first 15 pages are somewhat decent. They do what they're supposed to do. It sets up the story greatly. And don't come after me, but it might be in like the top 10 Goosebumps openings, like of all time. Is that good? And then just right after, crap. It is literally, let me symbolize this. A pile, it is one big pile of crap. It is unbelievably bad. It is so bad that it is the next highest book on the list. By the way, it's my least favorite. The next highest book in my ranking of the OG series is a whopping 4 points higher. It was that bad. I was so generous back then with all these books. Nah. I used to say this was only like a 4 out of 10. Guys, this is like a 3 out of 10. This is bad. It's unbelievably bad. It doesn't even feel like Stein wrote it too, because there's barely any like, I guess you could say there's no there is a bunch of Goosebumps tropes, but they don't feel the same. They don't feel like the ones that you've come used to, even in books like Werewolf of Fever Swamp, which surprisingly have a similar premise in a way. Not really, but yeah, this book is just unbelievably dog crap, and I don't have much to add. without getting into spoilers. So you know what? Really quick, I'll just say that as if it wasn't bad enough, in the last fourth, I mean, it is like basically directly on the last fourth of the book. Massive spoiler here. Click off if you haven't read this. The characters get transformed into dogs, and guess how? Oh, the dogs that were originally the barking ghosts body swap through a pit. That doesn't make sense. And to add on top of it, the whole rest of the book is basically those like fanfics about furries. So if you like furries, I guess this is for you. But I think a few of us do not really like furries. I mean, I'm sorry if you are, but it is. How is this a Goosebumps book? I mean, it is so bad. That last fourth, the rest of the book is like a 5. Nah, it's like a 4 out of 10. That last fourth of the book is dead serious, like a 0. Hard 0. It is terrible. Don't read this, please. I am begging you. Oh my god. In the episode, it's a bit better, but like Goosebumps for Dummies says, it's basically an accurate representation, so don't have your expectations too high. That's all I'm gonna say.
Great point. And I like that you put up the piece of poop Lego, because it reminds me of the scene when Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park finds the Triceratops dung, and he's like, that's one big pile of crap. And that's how I feel about this book. Okay, I guess I'll get into my thoughts, right? This, everybody wants to say that in the original 62 series, there is more hits than misses, and that's definitely true. And some people have kind of made excuses for R.L. Stine over the years, saying that, sometimes in some books he has his off days or his off months. Because back in the day, he was making a book a month, rushing these things out like they were, hot coals on the fire. But when you get to the, books 1 through 31, you start on Welcome to Dead House and you end on Night of the Living Dummy 2. And in the second half of the series, you start on The Barking Ghost and you end on Monster Blood 4. And I'll never get over that. The fact that you start on some of the worst Goosebumps books ever made. No offense to Monster Blood 4 fans out there, but that book's atrocious in terms of its structure and writing ability. I mean, same thing here. And I have to agree with Bruce. There's a solid concept here, but a concept can only take you so far unless you know how to handle it. If you know how to structure it, if you know how to plan it. And I honestly feel like R.L. Stine went into this blinded. Maybe he was drugged. Maybe he was just, willy-nilly having people add on to the book as it went along because he thought it might have been a fun inside joke. I couldn't tell you. But this feels like a patchwork book. Nothing makes total sense in any part of it. There's 4 distinct parts. I think y'all have already brought it up. There's like a solid first fourth of the book, setting up atmosphere. The second fourth is a bunch of prank fake outs. The third fourth gets into the weird stuff. And then the final fourth completely ruins the book if it had anything going for it. And this is one big pile of crap to me. I mean, if I really wanted to lay into some things, Mickey's a horrid character. The brother is one of the most annoying characters in Goosebumps history. When I get an annoying character,
too.
I mean, yeah, Cooper is annoying too because he whines and he doesn't do anything. And the whole thing with like Fergie, the setup with her character takes away from the fun of her as well. Like the whole twist of her being an insider to Mickey. Why is that there? The changing shed pit stuff, it kind of totally detracts from the urban legend atmosphere it was setting up in that first fourth. And you completely lose me when you get into the whole part where they become dogs and the twist ending involving chipmunks. That has to be one of the biggest wet fart endings in Goosebumps history. I mean, literally, you made the sound effect perfect there, Bruce. It was wet dookie hitting the toilet bowl. And it went down. It went down like a sinking ship, but with a lot of crap on it. So now, when you go down to look at the wreckage, you just can't help but say, "What were you thinking, Stine?" And the fact that this got made into an episode is so insulting. because there's so many better books that they could have made in the show. And I don't want to get into the episode because we have 2 more people to talk about for them to discuss. But we'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, rant over. I'm going to pass it over to the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. Ultimate Goosebumps Man, what do you think about the Barking Ghost?
Well, I have not actually read the book. I've been kind of busy this past week, so I haven't really had the time to go and read it. But after hearing all you guys, I am dreading it, and I'm thankful I'm only on book 6 right now. Because, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that one. And I don't know. That's all I really had to say about it. I can't really say much else at the time being. So.
But you've seen the episode, so
Yeah,
so at least you know the episode.
Just for that, like
the episode is mainly like it's pretty much a streamlined version with some mild tweaks. I mean, so you're not missing much. So yeah, at least you didn't have to suffer through it. At least yet. All right, we'll pass it over to BD Horror. I know he's going to have a roast for this thing. Bring out your grills. Bring out your barbecue skewers. Bring out your bibs. We got a roast coming. BD Horror, what do you have to say about the Barking Ghost?
First of all, this has got to be the biggest bait and switch cover in all of Goosebumps history. I mean, Mud Monsters rivals this, but the bait and switch of this cover, Tim Jacobus got paid a pretty penny to do nothing, because there's one thing to have a clickbait cover, and there's another thing to have a cover that does match something in the book, except you forgot that 60% of it was straight Triceratops doo-doo. Like, they completely lost track of what the goal was, and the beginning of the book is creepy. It had some reminders of, like, Cujo in there. You have some scary wooded area. You have an urban legend. You have dogs, which are quite terrifying at times. And you have the idea of this kid being vulnerable. And then it completely goes downhill. I'm talking about, there was a summer evening when me and my best friend were hanging out, and he has a Labrador. And the Labrador decided to roll around in a dead fish corpse that was by the koi pond in their backyard. The thing walked in, and we basically sprayed it with Febreze, the entire bottle. And the atrocity that came from that reminds me of the second half of this book, because no matter how much that cover may try to be Febreze, all you're going to end up doing is creating mustard gas. And me and my best friends are going to be bombed, just like my best friends on the podcast were, reading through this piece of dog doo-doo book. I mean, it has annoying characters. The older brother is terrible. Fergie, pointless, does not need to even be in the book, just there to progress the plot in the worst way possible. Whoever decided to come up with the idea of the changing tree, Stein, you must have hit Bob Marley's bong, because there's no way you thought that that was a good idea. You know what I'm saying? Lil Wayne has a quote in one of his songs called, "I flipped the bird at the bird. What's for dinner at Popeyes?" R.L. Stein flipped the bird at Scholastic, and we ended up eating the Popeyes that they picked up off that dirty cockroach-infested floor. And I got a piece of cockroach leg in my teeth right now. So I don't want to deal with this book anymore. This is doo-doo. And the only thing that's going to get slandered more than that is the episode, mainly because it has some good aspects to it that I will compliment, but there's a certain character in there whose acting is so atrocious that I think Are You Afraid of the Dark is going to be given some bliss afterward by me. So I'll wait to get into that in just a little bit. But those are my thoughts. This book gets a 4 out of 10. Doggy doo-doo.
Yeah, I give it a 2 out of 5 myself. I mean, it's an F. It's an upper tier F because I think there's worse that I've read in the series, or at least more infuriating. But it's still not anywhere close to being mediocre. It's one of those things that you look at and you're like, man, that thing should have been, burned, in the fire pits. If there's any Goosebumps books to be burned, please burn that one. Get rid of that one. But yeah, let's get into Spongy, and we'll do Spongy's book thoughts and episode thoughts to segue us into the episode.
All right, let's see what Spongy has to say.
Let me also just plug myself really quick. I have a Barking Ghost review up. That explains my thoughts better than what I just did, so go check that out.
And also, hasn't Stein gone on record and said Barking Ghost is his least favorite book?
Mm-hmm.
He said it's one of them. He said it's like Go Eat Worms, Barking Ghost. He hates those two specifically. So And there's a lot of merit to that too. I think they suck too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here's what Spongy has to say. So the Barking Ghost book, mediocre, kind of overrated as it's not one of the worst, at least to me. It's mostly boring in the first half and gets janky later on. I like the idea of what happens more than the setup, but it has no real transition to it. Ending sucks. Not especially awful, but just weak. Essentially, in my quotes, that would be Spongy is basically saying it's doo doo, but it's like doo doo that's submerged under the toilet water. It didn't get time to stick out yet. Episode. It's fine. Mostly gets hate due to being connected to the book, and I don't think that's totally fair. I respect how they fixed by adding the backstory and a more satisfying ending. Overall, it's there, some clunky stuff, but not to an awful extent. A bit weak, but you gotta repeat it at least a little. And those are his thoughts.
Those are pretty admirable thoughts. I guess I'll start with me because I probably have the least to say about this episode. I will say that I think the episode is an improvement over the book inherently because it's only 22 minutes and you're not having to sit through how many pages this book is. What is it, 130? I'm assuming around there. So you don't have to sit there and read the disappointment of the book. You just watch the episode. Now, the episode does have its own fair share of sins. There's some really bad acting. Mickey's actor, not that good. Cooper's actor, I mean, he was in a few other episodes of Goosebumps from memory, but he's not that good here either. Fergie's actress isn't that good. It's kind of like they phoned this one in and just said, "Hey, look, you scrap actors. We have to add an episode to this season. We're gonna make this. If you want some money, just show up." And that's what happened. But anyway, I do like that Spongy brought up there's added backstory. I like the beginning of the episode more than the book in some regards, because at least it offers some type of goofy but still kind of eerie reason to why these ghost dog exists. It's kind of vague, but I think it's kind of fun in the back half, from changing the changing shed to a changing tree. That at least feels more nature oriented and less random. Like, why is there a random shed that dates back all these hundreds of years? It's made into a tree that's old, and that makes more sense. And honestly, the way they made the tree look in the episode was very cool. I like that. And some of the changes to the plot, I think, work a little better. I think, from memory, I think Fergie might be in on it with Mickey, but it's not as annoyingly egregious as the book. And they kind of cleaned up the ending a little bit, at least for the main characters. You don't give them a crappy ending, but they still managed to pull off another wet fart with with the ending of the episode, which I think is probably the worst episode ending of the whole show, easily, in my opinion. And honestly, this is one of those that I completely forget exists. I completely, whenever I kind of brought it up to y'all before, whenever I'm looking at the episode lists, I'm like, oh yeah, they made a Barking Ghost episode. And it infuriates me that they chose to adapt this book. And it's a sign that not every single Goosebumps book should have been adapted. I know a lot of people have made that argument over the years. Go read Barking Ghost book and go watch the episode. You tell me if that deserved to get made. I mean, especially with the end product, it's not as terrible as the book. And I agree with Spongy. It's probably like a whole step up for me, but it's still on that bad, because it doesn't really quite hit that so bad it's good charming level. It just stays bad. Like the execution is still weak. It still putters out in the back half of the story. The ending's a wet fart. The concept is still not actually improved on like the book. It's pretty much still the same concept and setup. They don't do anything to fix the story where it counts. So that's where I'm at with it. So I'll pass it over to Goosebumps for Dummies. What did you think about the Barking Ghost episode?
It's like puking, but instead of puking up just pure vomit and stomach acid, you're puking up chocolate. It's slightly tastier. It's not as bad as the book. It's definitely an improvement, like you said. There are things it does much better, like how it's not going to be 2 hours of your life. 2 hours of your life wasted. It's only 22 minutes, which is still a lot, but like it's not 2 hours. So, it's a lot more enjoyable than the book, because of course you're not sitting there reading dog shit. You're sitting there watching sort of dog shit. The only real praise I can give this episode is that it's not on DVD, I believe, so that's good. One of the actors was in Dummy Free, which is pretty awesome. And I don't know, it visually looked okay with the CGI effects, with the dog jumping through the walls and stuff. I liked it that it was accurate to the book. Not that I like that it is accurate, because the book is awful. But I'm happy we actually got an episode that stayed true to the book, unlike some episodes that kinda go out there. Headless Ghost. Anyways, yeah, it's an overall just really, really meh episode. It's not awful, but I'd say it's around like Bad Hair Days tier, where it's funny, but it's not really that good either, but it's not bad. So it's just whatever.
I think Bad Hair Day did get put on DVD. I want to say it was with either it came from Beneath the Sink or Go Eat Worms as DVD.
That area was on the Go Eat Worms DVD.
And Barking Ghost was also on there.
Yeah, Ghost Beach.
Ghost Beach is okay. It was Ghost Beach, the Ghost DVD. I haven't. Yeah, I've only ever watched one DVD. Because all of them are still online for free. So as long as they're online, I don't have to touch my collection. It's fine. But yeah, I think it was put on DVD, and I guarantee you that probably was not a good seller. Because if you look at the episode selection, that has to be one of the worst. All right. But anyways, we'll pass it over to the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. What did you think about the Barking Ghost episode?
All right, so I thought it was. I have mixed feelings on it. I don't think it's the worst episode by far. That's reserved for Teacher's Pet, but and for me, it's kind of like upper end of bad and like very low end of average. It's just kind of right in that middle area for me. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that I think is kind of fun, and there are some elements to it that kind of are enjoyably bad. But most of it is overall just kind of, it's very roughly made. There's a lot of really rushed editing in it. You know, Fergie's actress is awful. No offense to the actress, but she was not good in this. You know, Mickey, I think he was also awful, but like entertainingly awful with him. And I think, like, I know people have said this before, but I feel like I have to say it. If Sid from Toy Story was a real person, Mickey would be him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Totally.
but yeah, I think there's some fun elements to it. Like, I kind of enjoy it. I think it's a little interesting when the kids are acting like when they're possessed by like the older pirate guys. I think that was kind of fun. And I think they do a better job at that than they did at their own characters. But and like, yeah, I don't know. And like, the ending is terrible, but it's laughably terrible for me anyway. Like, I laughed at it just because of how bad it was.
I also will say this: the stunt dogs in the episode did a pretty good job, and like they're at least creepy to a certain extent. You know, it kind of helps save it. Imagine if they were CGI dogs. I mean, they could have went that route, and
In
that
the
would have been even
90s,
more
just-
atrocious. Yeah. Oh boy, we would have had like a Jake the Snake Cobra on our hands, maybe. I don't know. All right, let's pass it over to BD Horror. Great points, by the way, Ultimate Goosebumps Man. What did you think about the Barking Ghost episode, BD Horror?
So it's got some things that are better than the book. Obviously, it does give backstory a little bit to the origin of the changing tree. However, granted how goofy and stupid it is and mind-numbingly dumb. But that aside, I think I do like the atmosphere to the book, the episode, compared to the book a little bit. The stunt dogs, they are carrying this episode because they're actually terrifying. The way that they snarl, the way they got those white fangs, and they did a great job. Reminds me kind of I watched John Wick recently with the movies. They got great stunt dogs. These are some great stunt dogs, so they help out it a lot. And they're quite terrifying. You have some good chase scenes in there. I think the main character, I think it's Cooper. He does, I think, an okay job. I don't think he's a bad actor in this one. I mean, he's not the greatest, but he doesn't do a bad job. I was gonna say that Mickey looks like Sid from Toy Story, so I'm glad you brought that up. Identical twins. And Mickey's not great, but I think he's laughably bad, so he's not the worst thing ever. However, the 3 weakest points, I think, in this whole episode. First of all, the dad sucks. The dad has got to be one of the biggest gaslighters I've ever seen. This man just harasses his kid about his imagination and doesn't take anything he says seriously. You also have the fact that the ending sucks. Okay, I don't care about how the pirate backstory fits in. It's stupid. It's goofy. The Alvin and the Chipmunks wannabe ripoff. I don't care for it. The voices made it even goofier. It is laughably bad, but I don't think that justifies the writing. And oh boy, this is the worst offender in the episode. Fergie, I looked you up on Google Images. No pictures popped up of you in terms of your actress. I know why. Because you had to retire after this. Fergie's acting is NPC acting. It is some of the worst acting that I've seen that's akin to Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think she does a terrible job. I mean, no offense to her. Maybe it was her first role, but she's terrible. First of all, she cannot act out scenes. It feels very unnatural. And it's to the point that it's taking me out of the episode because it feels very much like someone's holding a script behind Cooper and she has to read off of it. So for you, you need to equip this and you need to equip this. All right, I'm just going to give a little spray over here to Fergie. Did not appreciate your acting. Need to clean it up a little bit. All right. So Fergie's acting, the ending, and everything else, is not good about this episode. However, some parts are a little bit better. The dogs did a great job, and it is laughably terrible at some point. So it gets probably like a 4.5, right? 0.5 higher, but it's still bad. So I didn't enjoy it much. But at least they did something a tiny bit better with the episode.
Great points. Bruce, you have something to add?
Yes. Really quickly. I don't think you have to edit this out. Alejandro, can you just turn your phone sideways? There's an echo because of like whatever your phone's on is like echoing through the mic. Okay.
I'll just
something. I don't know. So, anyways, I know I did already speak my opinions. I won't go further into it. It's very basic, very similar to the episode. Everything they said. Though I do have a quick story. This will only take a minute. When I was a little kid, right after seeing the Goosebumps movie in the theaters, I'm serious, it was like literally days after, I was with my grandma, and we, at the time, I'll just admit it, we weren't the best in wealth, but you know what? You got to do what you got to do. And I found somebody's I haven't told anybody about this, I don't think, but I found someone's entire Goosebumps DVD collection. It was like 7 DVDs. Now, I only got to pick out a few. I got this one, a Night of the Living Dummy collection one, and a Monster Blood one. Now, sadly, those two were lost to time. I don't know where the heck they were. I think they were in pretty bad shape anyway because of moving houses, water damage, stuff like that. But this one, I remember watching the heck out of those two. So that might have been why they kind of had damage. This has to be, I mean, someone try to testify this because this has to be the absolute worst DVD ever. I watched the heck out of those two, like I just said. I maybe watched this one once. Here's the episodes you get. I think you can already have a sneak peek. You get The Headless Ghost, Awesome Ants, Teacher's Pet, massive crap, Ghost Beach, Barking Ghost, and Be Careful What You Wish For. I mean, is this a joke, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, Beatty, please. Can you spray this really quick? Like, just
I think
terrible.
the only thing worse than that DVD release has to be the Are You Afraid of the Dark Freaky Favorites DVD, which has every single terrible season 6 episode that we will roast on this podcast on it. All of them. So that should tell you that, yeah, that probably is the worst DVD Goosebumps release ever. The 2-pack of Ghost Beach and The Headless Ghost. Godspeed whoever owns that.
I mean, I will say though, while I agree with most of them, I will say I like Headless Ghost. I don't know. I have fun with it.
I mean, I think it's fine compared to the other episodes. That
oh yeah, it's easily the best one of those 6, but.
Okay, so seems like we're all kind of on the same page, right? With the Barking Ghost episode being better than the book. I think that's a unanimous decision here. We don't have to do any debates. So Barking Ghost will be the representative going up against the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode that we have next, which is The Tale of the Hungry Hounds. And if you don't know what the story's about, it basically is about these two girls who, one of them is like a city slicker going to visit her country bumpkin cousin. And they're up in the attic playing around with some doodads and doohickeys, wedding dresses, playing make-believe because they're bored. And they find this trunk with like a lock on it with numbers, and they can't find out what the numbers are. So it goes into a tangent subplot about this girl not being able to ride her horse at her own family farm because her mom is afraid that she's going to end up like her ancestor, who may or may not be linked to this box. So they pull out a Ouija board and they summon the ghost to give them the passcode to the lock. And they manage to open the chest. And the girl that lives on the farm pulls out this horse riding outfit. She puts it on and it transports them. And I'm not making this up. I'm not kidding. It literally does this in the episode into a dreamscape. This is a dreamscape episode where they literally walk out of a golden gilded staircase out of the attic window to the ground below. And now they're transported, I'm presuming, back in time. And there's a bunch of wandering the whole episode. You don't know what's going on. You got these random ghost guys coming up. You have this girl being possessed by presumably her ancestor ghost, talking about a dead fox and how it involved her death. And then you get to the climax, where they come up with this idea that in order to get out of this paradox, they have to feed these dogs that caused the girl's ancestor to fall off her horse and die from getting trampled to death. And the girl, one of the girls, the city slicker girl, tries to feed the dogs, but it does not go the way you expect. And the episode randomly ends before we understand any sort of, logical explanation of what we just witnessed. And it literally ends on probably the most anticlimactic way possible. And then the episode goes away. And that is what you'll expect out of The Tale of the Hungry Hounds. And it's pretty bad. In my opinion, I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts. It's horrid. It's awful, just like the Barking Ghost book. I mean, same level of awful. I have struggled with this because I think in terms of like kids horror and like what's lame and what's not cool, Hungry Hounds has to be the lamest kids horror story I think in existence. It wins that, Razzie for that. It's so uninteresting. It's so mind-numbingly boring. The characters are so one-dimensional, and they're annoying on top of it, that it's almost like you're witnessing a car crash, but instead of like being anticipating, a car ramming into a guardrail or to another car, the car just constantly rolls into the point where you're starting to feel disturbed that you keep watching, but you can't look away. And then once you realize when it's all done, you realize it's been 2-3 minutes of your whole life, or in this case, 25 minutes of your life gone. And you can never get that back. And you're going to be traumatized forever whenever you think about it. That's how this episode feels. It's so mediocre that it sends itself to the awful territory. And I think it's because of the execution. There's no coherency to the story. Even, if you look at the whole metaphorical idea about, ancestors maybe getting a second chance and how they might play to, their next of kin, that's not even well done. So it's just a very sloppy, boring episode. And I'll just leave it at that, because I know a lot of you have some strong opinions about it. And I'm going to pass it over to Ultimate Goosebumps Man first. What did you think about The Tale of the Hungry Hounds?
Now, this may sound extreme, but I would rather be trampled to death by a horse than have to sit through this episode again. It would be much less painful.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, this was horrible. The acting from everybody, terrible. The plot was so nonsensical, and there was like so many like random tangents in a 25-minute episode that just don't come to any kind of satisfying conclusion in the end. It's like the whole horse riding subplot makes no sense, has no impact on the plot whatsoever. I feel like it was just thrown in there for the sake of it. There was like, even like the episode title, The Hungry Hounds, they don't come into play until like the last 5 minutes of the episode. And it's just like, that's such like a mismarketed title. And I even say, like, I haven't seen much of Are You Afraid of the Dark, but even the Midnight Society portions of this episode were dull and lame. That's not something that's common. Usually they're the highlights a lot of the time. And like,
Wait,
this
I'm
is
sorry.
so underwhelming.
I have to say this as well. From what I remember, it's been a while since I've seen this, but at the end, all the characters are like, "Wow, that was such a good." Really? What was that? And then half of the ones that are like amazing, they're like, I don't know about that.
You gotta wonder if that was a running joke by the writers that they like purposely did that, or if they were so on their high horses about these bad episodes that they actually thought the people would like them.
Fun fact. You know how R.L. Stine laments The Barking Ghost? Says it's one of the worst books. DJ McHale, the creator of Are You Afraid of the Dark, has gone on record saying that he thinks that this is one of the worst Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. So he's right there with the fans. He's like, this one was an odd idea that just did not work, and he does not blame the fandom for hating this episode over the years. I've seen a lot of lists put this in like the bottom 5, and I totally agree. But yeah, great points, by the way, Ultimate Goosebumps, man. Let's pass it over to Alejandro, Goosebumps for Dummies. What did you think about The Tale of the Hungry Hounds?
This might be a bit controversial, and I'm not going to say it's any better than the episode of The Barking Ghost, but it's not as bad as y'all are saying. I get the incoherent stuff about the plot that goes nowhere, and the unexplained shenanigans going on in the episode, but it was actually kind of enjoyable. I liked it because it was really out there. Like a Ouija board was in the episode. Something I thought I'd never see in Are You Afraid of the Dark, period. And the characters were interesting enough, like we have the City Girl, the spiritual walk the night plot.
Hey, Alex, you want to fix your audio?
I thought I was tripping. I could not hear a single beat.
I know, it was so quiet.
Hold on. Well, let's try Alex one more time. Hey, speak. I think his audio cut. I don't know what's going on.
Is your phone against like your leg or something?
Is your hand against maybe your microphone?
Hello?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
we can hear you.
okay,
Okay, cool.
Bro.
Sorry about that.
Did you hear any of that?
No.
No,
Just repeat it from where you.
But it's okay. We won't edit it out. It's okay.
So, this episode isn't as bad as y'all are saying, as controversial as that might be. I get all of the incoherent stuff, like the plot. It kind of has a few loose ends there. Like, what the hell was the whole dreamscape? Bruce, why are you looking at me like that? What was the deal with the box in the first place? What was going on? It was just so weird. But I thought the episode was enjoyable enough because of how weird it was. It was very, very out there in my opinion. Okay, y'all are looking at me. I like the fact that the Ouija board. I like that, but I kind of like the dream sequence stuff as well. Sorry, the dreamscape. I thought that stuff was kind of cool, but it should have been explained because we got absolutely zero explanation for that. This episode isn't better than the Barking Ghost episode, but it's certainly better than the Barking Ghost book, if I'm being honest. I get all of your guys' problems. I just think this episode was enjoyable, and I liked that it was a little different. But yeah, there was definitely some stuff that they really need to go back and fix, like majorly. 4.5 out of 10, I guess. Maybe 5 out of 10.
I mean, I definitely agree with when you say that it's better than Barking Ghost book, but I think Barking Ghost episode is more enjoyable.
Yeah.
All right, so Bruce, you're making some faces over there. We'll pass it over to you, bud. I know you're frothing to say something about this episode. What do you have to say about The Tale of the Hungry Hounds?
this, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. I mean, let me just go through my thought process here. And this will actually transition to my final answer on which is better. First of all, when I judge the Goosebumps books, from like way different than any other media ever. I mean, film, just cinema history, whatever. Any other books for that matter, besides maybe Fear Street, since I know those came out pretty frequently, but it's because Stein, whether or not he was ghostwriting these books, he was pushing out tons of them. I mean, there were times, yes, you can look it up, where 3 books came out a month. That is insane. I don't care what anyone says. That shouldn't be possible, but he pulled it somehow.
Ghostwriters.
So, okay, yeah, but he also did some work with those books. It is proven. So, and I actually will get to some of those. So, get ready. But, yeah, I compare Goosebumps to any other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, because I know those came out somewhat frequently, but they had as many shots as they had. They weren't making 3 episodes a month, at least to my knowledge. So, when you think about this, I judge, like, let's just say Jason Takes Manhattan. It's one of the worst movies I have ever seen, and I am a massive Jason fan. Now, if I compared that randomly to like a Goosebumps book, I mean, there's nothing to compare it to, because with Jason Takes Manhattan, they had plenty of time to make it. With Barking Ghost, let's just say, for example, he probably had a week, and he either was not in a good spot mentally, or I'm not kidding, or like Completionist said, he might have been like just joking around with it, having beers while writing it. I don't care. Call me out. But let's now compare it to Hungry Hounds. Hungry Hounds, like I just said, has a lot more of an advantage. Well, it could have been. So when you see it bomb this incredibly hard, it is insane. B, he's gonna bring this point up for sure, but you will not remember a single thing that happens. I literally, Completionist just explained the whole plot. I don't remember a single thing you said. I don't. I besides horse riding, that's all I heard. So that's how bad this is. If a movie or an episode or a book of anything can leave your mind that incredibly fast, oh my god, it's hard to even like comprehend how terrible that is. Like, this might just be the worst, like, anything I've ever experienced. So yeah,
To put that into
it's
perspective,
terrible.
back in the day, there were SNCC tapes and like Are You Afraid of the Dark home videotapes that were put out, kind of like to compete with Goosebumps, I guess, or in the same vein of how the Goosebumps tapes would operate. You know, you have episodes, but Tale of the Hungry Hounds was on a SNCC show compilation VHS release, so that was the representation on one of the tapes of the show for kids that maybe saw the SNCC tape at home or like at home video stores. They're like, hey, I'll try out these SNCC shows. Imagine getting the Hungry Hounds. I actually owned that tape as a kid, so I grew up with this episode. So I might remember it a little bit differently than others because it has a lot of nostalgia for me. But it's one of those things that I remember hating it as a kid too. So I definitely understand, at a younger age, it fled my mind for many years, and the only reason why I still remember it is because I freshened up before this video. Which segues into BD horror. I know you mentioned that you remember almost nothing about this episode and the Barking Ghost. But what did you think about the Tale of the Hungry Hounds, BD?
I watched this 8 minutes ago. Eight. Can count that on my finger. 8 minutes ago. Completionist before the video started. I had to tell him that he has to be the one to explain the plot because I watched it 8 minutes ago. and I forgot the entire first half. This is some of the most boring plot I've ever seen within a kids horror episode, let alone story. Watching this is like inviting your crush out to prom. You wait 3 hours for her to show up, and then she shows up in the back seat of the car with your best friend, and he's putting a couple Trojans in his back pocket. This is terrible. You don't want to sit through this. There's no point. The level of pain you'll go through is something that nobody should ever experience. No amount of Dolce Gabbana the One can save this episode because I don't remember any of it. All right, no amount of this. I should have just used this toilet paper to cover my eyes, and I would remember as much plot as I did 5 minutes ago after refreshing my mind. These characters are forgettable. They have no good acting. The beginning attic scene is probably some of the most useless filler dialogue I've seen. Like, the girl dresses up in a wedding costume. They have a little bit of banter. It goes nowhere. They go out in the middle of the field, find this horse. It's supposed to represent something. Horse riding is just a mild undertone in this episode. Nothing comes from it. Then you have this girl basically channeled through a Ouija board, put on this costume, get sent into this dreamscape, and this plot is terrible, y'all. She keeps on repeating, I have to feed the hounds on repeat to the point that you want to take a pen and just put it straight through your ears. I get it. You need to feed the hounds. But then when it comes time to feed the hounds and they get the doggy kibble, these hounds don't go for the kibble. No, they go for the best friend for some reason. And you know who saves the day in classic Bambi style? The little fox that's only name dropped for like half a second in the episode shows up miraculously and saves the day. Yeah, that's right. Feeding the hounds. Do you know how this episode is solved? They didn't feed the hounds with food. They didn't risk their lives. No, they had a fox essentially be implied to being killed and eaten in order to save themselves. That's the solution to this. Animal abuse and killing. That is the solution to this episode. So if you're sitting there and wondering what people were cooking when they came up with this episode, there was no cooking. In the words of Gordon Ramsay, I cannot say what he says, but you know what he says involving terrible food. That's what this is. It's burnt crap. It's burnt doggy doo-doo. Forget that fish carcass Labrador that I had to deal with my best friend. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. Well, the most forgettably worst thing I've ever seen, luckily. So thank God for my amnesia, because if I had to suffer through this, imagining the plot, imagining the characters, I would be depressed for the rest of my life. And that's all I have to say. This episode gets a 3 out of 10. And there's only really 2 other episodes from Are You Afraid of the Dark that are worse than this one, in my opinion.
Okay,
That shows that this
that's
is the
too
bottom 3.
generous.
This is wait till you see Virtual Pets, then you'll tell me it's generous.
3 out of 10? No. Tell me if you just forgot the entire plot, how is that a 3 out of 10? What's good about it that boosts it up 3 points?
Because I forgot about it, which makes it better. Hey, you have to remember the plot to Virtual Pets and Gruesome Gourmets, and it sticks with you like post-traumatic disorder. That's what I have to deal with. So that's why it gets 0 out of 10.
I will say this: nobody's brought it up, but the ending, like how the climax wraps up, makes zero logical sense. And mild spoilers. If you haven't seen it, we're saving you the trouble here. So, the dogs start chasing the ghost fox, and the girl that's possessed by her ancestor in the horse riding outfit runs outside, and then she's magically on a white steed. And she's like, I'm going to chase after La Petite Rouge, which is the name of the fox. And she goes into the forest, and the city slicker girl goes back to the attic staircase, climbs up back into the attic, thinking that maybe she went there. And then the dreamscape is over, and her cousin is magically back to normal. How does any of that make sense? And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those unnecessarily convoluted endings, and that just kind of sinks it further, in my opinion. But let's hear what Spongy has to say, and then we'll get into overall thoughts. Anybody else want to add? Why we have intermission?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I am a very easy to please person when it comes to movies and TV. I can tend to find the good even in some bad stuff because I like to stay positive. I don't like to crap on stuff often because it's such a modern cliche nowadays to hate on everything that comes out. But I gave this a 1.5 out of 10. I've never been so infuriated and so like bored out of my mind than I was with this episode. And like
Yeah.
I'm never saying, 'cause it makes me feel like I'm becoming one of those internet people who hates on everything, but I can't help it because this episode is so bad.
And like, if DJ McHale himself endorses it to the fans and says, "Hey, I understand," like even he's a realist about it. Like Arnold Stein can be a realist too. So I'm not trying to say that one's better than the other about it, but yeah, he seems to be a good sport about fans coming after him about this episode because I think he at least directed the episode. I don't know if he wrote it. He might have. I forget who wrote that one. But yeah, whoever wrote Hungry Hounds, Godspeed. I hope it didn't tank your career. But BD, do you have what Spongy had to say?
Yeah, I have it here. Also, I should have recorded this review from the toilet, but I'll save it for virtual pets. Anyway, this one, Hungry Hounds, is mid AF, as the kids say. Spongy's very hip, people. There's honestly nothing notably bad about it per se. It just lacks any oomph to it. It takes like 14 minutes to even get a mention of hounds, and while we start at the attic right away, it takes a while to get going and mostly drags. We get some good ideas regarding how Dora died, how the mom is haunted by her death, and the hounds and all that, but it doesn't quite come together. It doesn't dig into the deeper stuff enough. Mom is barely in it and just gets over herself, and Christine has to tell us that. The music is pretty nice, and again, there's a good atmosphere and build-up. It just doesn't take that extra step. There's this ghost guy tied into this, which feels kind of pointless. It feels like the story has enough ideas, but doesn't really come together as much as it would. It was okay, just left me feeling a bit empty in the end. Very generous.
Yeah, he totally made me think about the atmosphere of the episode, which I will give to the show for this. The setting was beautiful, I think, and like the scenery and the lighting and all that, and how they did the outside was phenomenal. I really liked some of the effects too, even though we're getting into the dreamscape stuff. That transition was kind of cool for its time. And this was like a show from '93. I mean, it looked pretty good. And I will say that he is kind of like I do see where he's coming from with the idea about the mom. I kind of wish that was played more into the story of we never really got to understand too much understanding of why the girl was not allowed to ride her own horse. I mean, that was like legit the reason why she took out a Ouija board to find her ancestor because she was a I don't know, maybe she had a gut instinct that she was a horseback rider. I don't know. I think it was actually might have mentioned by her mom. But that should have been played up more. At least there could have been a more emotional story to have with it. And, it still would have been boring, but there would have at least been that. And yeah, it just didn't even offer that. Spongy, he's a lot more fairer than we can be, and I will say that. But a mid to Spongy, is saying a lot. So, BD, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say, building off of what Spongy said, he did kind of make a good point. And this is kind of what my main problem with this episode is in another regard. It does feel like similar stuff to we see in like Disney animated movies and stuff like that. It has that at least capability of emotional, draw to it where they could actually make a good story out of it involving the mom and everything. But it just feels like they took all the laziest corners possible and they kind of leave you with the nothing burger. So it's not, to be fair, again, defending that this is in my bottom three, but it's not the bottom of the bottom three. It has some potential. Like, I think Spongy makes a good point. There's some emotional stuff in there that if they would have highlighted, even though it's not scary, it would have at least made for more interesting of an episode. But it's just the fact that they missed out on that tanks the score. But it's not like it was a complete loss at the same time.
All right. So judging off, did Spongy say which one he thought was better, or did he just say his thoughts?
Yeah, he
Because
has. Let me quickly read it. I think it's like a couple sentences.
okay, let's read off what Spongy thinks is better first, and then we'll pass
Okay,
through it.
so Spongy will start off the comparison for us. Book-wise, Hungry Hounds beats Barking Ghost easily. These are some sentiments shared by completionists and Ultimate as well. It's not even that good, but it felt less tedious. For the episode, it's closer, but I say Barking Ghost. Hounds has better directing and acting, generous, but a weaker ending. Barking Ghost wins out due to that, personally speaking.
Yeah. So we'll pass it over to you, VD. Which one do you think is better? Since we have I think we all agree that the Barking Ghost book is probably worse than Hungry Hounds. So it's pretty much a running for the Barking Ghost episode versus Hungry Hounds. Out of the two, which one do you prefer?
I'm gonna say this, and this may shock some of you because it's gonna go against what you guys have been saying. I would actually still put the book slightly higher above Hungry Hounds, and the main reason why I have to say that is because as bad as the second half of Barking Ghost is and how much it tanks the story, I still think that the setting to it and the beginning has some creepy stuff in there. And the main reason and complaint that people have about Barking Ghost is the fact that the story falls off significantly after a certain point. But the urban legend and the dogs, even in the book, are still described very creepy. And I would honestly say that the book with the dogs is slightly, it's not scarier than the episode because the episode has well-trained dogs in it that look scary, but it's creepier. The atmosphere in the book in the beginning is still pretty good. So I feel like that's still a saving grace to it. While in Hungry Hounds, really only the emotional aspect is something that you could possibly defend about it. Otherwise, the whole reason why it's forgettable is that there's nothing really significant, nothing really scary to me, nothing really worth remembering. While in Barking Ghost, I will remember that Stein kind of paid homage to Cujo with the beginning of the book and some of the creepy scenes in there. So I have to give the book slightly above Hungry Hounds, and I think the episode is at least 0.5 above. Well, in this case, it would be 1.5 above the Hungry Hounds stuff. So
Okay, so for you, Barking Ghost both ways is better.
yeah,
Now, I guess I'll share mine. While I don't think that wholesale the book is better than the episode for Barking Ghost, I do think you have a point that it is scarier in some scenes and is done a little bit better. Like the first fourth of the book was actually pretty good, I would say. It's not as annoying and as egregious as the story goes along, but I definitely think there's a lot more horror there to be had than anything from Hungry Hounds. Now, the episode is definitely goofier. The episode, there's a lot more to chew on with the story because it's more streamlined, and there is some sacrifice to be made with that. You get a goofier overall product, but I think I'm less, angry with the episode than the book because I think the episode for the most part stays goofy for the whole time. It kind of leans into it a little harder, and I think there's mild charm to be had, not real charm, but mild charm with how hilariously dumb it is. The book is just frustrating, to see it fall apart that badly. Hungry Hounds is literally the most boring thing you can ever sit through, right? So like comparing Hungry Hounds to Barking Ghost episode, which I think is better than the book, I think Barking Ghost is still more memorable, even though it's forgettable too. You know what I mean? Both of these episodes, books. I think the book's more infamous than either episode. Barking Ghost book lives in infamy, but the episode's forgettable, and so is Hungry Hounds. And whenever I think about them, at least I can have more fun with the Barking Ghost. So I'm gonna have to give it to the Barking Ghost episode. Wins out. I think the episode's better than Hungry Hounds, but I think the Hungry Hounds is also better than Barking Ghost book. So I'm in that camp. So I'll pass it over to Bruce. Bruce, which one do you think is better?
If I haven't made it clear enough, I think that Barking Ghost, just like BD, wins significantly more both ways than Hungry Hounds. Hungry Hounds has just nothing to offer. Though I will say, I forgot to tell you this, and this is another thing I don't think I've ever told anybody, that I actually read Barking Ghost. I own a boat at a marina, and I bring books down there all the time. And one of the books that I brought one weekend, and I'm serious, I brought like 4 because I can usually power through them. There's not much to do down there when you're not like actually going out for a spin. I like to read them. So the first book I choose, and it was the first night down there. It was a Friday night. There was visitors on the boat. I'm like, what? And then they were apparently 90s kids that were just in the marina visiting our boat. And so they were like, oh my gosh, do you have Goosebumps books? And I'm like, yeah. And then they're like, oh my God, the dog one sucks. And I'm like, what? I'm actually serious. They said that. And I was just so shocked. And I'm like, so, because I haven't read it yet, by the way, at this point. And everyone has said that it's bad. So I'm like, now my expectations have dropped even lower. So I read it, and it was by far the worst reading experience I have ever had. It was just that whole night I was reading it, and I couldn't finish it. I mean, this is one of the longest, I'm saying as in for being at the boat where you don't have signal or anything for the most part, unless you're at this one very specific spot, which is where I text y'all in the Discord actually. I was basically reading this book all weekend and I just couldn't get through it. I would read 10 pages and I'd be like, oh my God, and then I'd just put it away because it was just so bad. I would just sit, and I didn't want to start a new one because then I'd forget what would happen. And to be honest, I forgot most of what happened in this book over time anyway. So I will say that, but Hungry Hounds is still really bad and definitely worse.
I have to say, before I pass it over to Alex, when I was a kid, I read the first half of Barking Ghosts and I never finished it. I put it away. I had a strong inclination that the story was going to end up bad, and I did not finish it in its entirety until I was an adult. I never read the second half.
Sorry, God, I keep making this longer than it has to be. I have definitely told this to some of you. I don't know who, but I think actually no, I've told this for dummies for sure. When I was in 6th grade, one of the heights of my like reading Goosebumps, I guess, it was like the most I ever had like read in a while before this year where I've been binging them this whole year. But I remember they had tons of these OG books in the school library, so I really took advantage of it. And that was one of the ones. I loved that cover so much that I saved it for the very end of the year. And I went, you know what? In the last, like, because back then it took me a couple weeks to read a book when I was a little bit younger. I would be like, you know, I'm going to save the last 2 weeks of school to read this one. And folks, I made it about 30 pages in, and I never picked it up. I just couldn't get into it. I don't remember anything that happened when I was rereading it, kinda, you know, because I was basically just fresh starting it. But yeah, if it was that bad when I was in 6th grade, I mean, come on. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I feel similarly. So let's pass it over to Alex. Which one do you think is better? I think we already know the answer, but we just want to hear you say it.
Is this even a competition? I feel like every episode it's not really a competition. Maybe once we had a competition. Maybe like Jake the Snake. I don't know what y'all's opinions are on that because I wasn't there, but like basically every episode that I've been on, no competition. This one has a bit, but not really. Barking Ghost book. Do I even need to say anything? One of the worst books ever written. Probably the worst of the OG series. Besides Be Careful What You Wish For. The episode, the Hungry Hounds. Sure, I do like it more than y'all, but it's not that great still. Especially compared to the Barking Ghost episode. It's a steaming pile of shit served on a plate for some fucking reason. Because apparently that's legal, according to whoever the hell decided to write that episode. God. Yeah, it's still nothing compared to the Barking Ghost episode. Sure, the Barking Ghost episode is not good, period, like at all. But it has more going for it than the book and Hungry Hounds, for sure. So obviously, Barking Ghost episode. No takebacks.
I'm there with you. I totally agree. And that ends up on Ultimate Goosebumps Man. I think I already know where you're going to go with this, but which one do you think is better?
Barking Ghost episode. There's no competition here. Like, like words cannot describe how much I despised Hungry Hounds. I've already just said it. I don't need to say anything more about that episode. Barking Ghost, objective, they're all bad, but the Barking Ghost episode is objectively the best one. So at least it has enjoyable moments despite being bad.
Okay, so that means that on the running tally of Goosebumps versus Are You Afraid of the Dark, currently, I think it was previously we had what was it?
4-1.
4-1, and now it's going to be
5-1.
5-1, right? Yeah, 5-1. Or where is this? It's a 4-1 because episodes 1, 3, 4, and 5. No, episodes 1, 3, and 4. Goosebumps 1. Episode 5, I think. Are You Afraid of the Dark 1. So this would be the 4th one for Goosebumps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now it's 4-1. Goosebumps wins. Beats Are You Afraid of the Dark. The only Are You Afraid of the Dark victory so far has been the cameras episode where we talked about Curious Camera and Say Cheese. They won there, but sometimes they can bring up a good fight. Sometimes they're a lot closer. But in this case, it's almost like, I think we all kind of said it best. It's like comparing two piles of crap, and which one's a shinier piece of crap? Which one would you rather stare at? The one that's shiny or the dull one? I mean, that's basically where I'm at with it.
Yeah, like
So
at least the shiny one, like kind of glistens, you know? You see the flies buzzing around it. And like in the hot sunlight when it's just kind of melting on your sidewalk, it's like the flies kind of, you know, make that beautiful buzzing sound, but like the dull one, it's just like you can see whatever your dog ate in it, and it's just really gross. And the flies are so they're so flabbergasted by that off.
Why do you have so much detail in this? Do you just be staring at piles of crap on the sidewalk?
That's correct.
We didn't need the visual, Bruce.
Such detail.
But we get the
Mozart.
point. All right, and that segues into our discussion. And I would say this. You know, we're talking about our favorite dog media. I would say a good portion of dog-themed movies I've seen are absolute crap. And I genuinely mean that. Like, they can never make a dog movie without making it just really dumb, slapstick, generic comedy stuff that we've seen before. And we've seen dog horror and kids horror. And I've only ever heard of, I think, When the Ghost Dog Howls being a genuinely good ghost book, or maybe Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried from Spine Tinglers being good. So, like, in kids horror, obviously, I think we come to a conclusion that dog horror is very hit or miss. So, dog media, if it goes into the comedy route, at least you know that. And to kind of start off the discussion, what I chose to talk about was like the original Air Bud movie and the original Beethoven movie, because those movies are charming family dog-centered movies, but it doesn't go into the egregious camp as the sequels went along, and that's where it started to lose me. When you get to like Air Buddies, Santa Buddies, whatever it's called in Air Bud, I'm out. And then when we get to like after Beethoven 3 and we go straight to video, I'm out. I mean, those movies are terrible. But something about those first movies are special to me. You know, Kevin Zegers is an Air Bud, and so is I forget the actor's name. It'll come to me. Brendan Fletcher. They were both Goosebumps alum, and they're in Air Bud. So if you want to watch a Goosebumps alum movie, you can go watch Air Bud. Fun fact. But a dog playing basketball, that's cool. I thought that was cool as a kid. Beethoven, you know, family gets a dog when the dad's obviously not a dog person, and the joke is that the dog ruins all the dad's things. Funny stuff. And you also have some messages that I think should have been in My Harry's Adventure, with like an evil lab scientist doing experiments on dogs. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The plot of Beethoven should have been My Harry's Adventure. I think that would have been a whole better setup, and might have been a ripoff, but I would take that any day over the book. So yeah, I mean, I'll start it off. Those are my two picks. I'll pass it around. Who wants to take it next? Bruce, what do you have to say? What is your favorite piece of dog media?
So before I get into my actual like favorite / recommendations for you guys, I will say the one thing I do remember very much as a childhood kind of thing is when I was very young, and I have seen it countless times. Veggie Tales, stuff like that. Born Christian, awesome stuff when I was younger. I loved episodes like you guys probably don't know what this is, but like there was this one with like Frankenstein in it, kinda basically, called Where's God When I'm Scared? Fire. But also, that's not related to dogs, but what is All Dogs Go to Heaven. That is a good movie if you're Christian, duh. So I will say that if you're saying like I don't know if that's like a comedy, kind of just more of an animated movie, but if you're saying like more family, like yay kind of stuff, that's what I would say. Now that you bring that up, but my two actual recommendations in dog media is actually two Goosebumps books. So we got Please Don't Feed the Vampire. This one has mixed ratings, but I really enjoyed one half. I think you can guess what that is. The one with Fifi, the dog. There are two routes in this book you can take. You can either I'm gonna spoil, it's just only the first couple pages, but you can either have the dog get the blood and turn into a vampire, or you can have you turn into a vampire. Now, the you turn into a vampire, not great. It's just okay, it's good. The whole book is good, but the dog storyline is amazing. And this was the first GYG I like at least somewhat experienced. I finally finished it a while later, around like early November probably. So highly recommend if you really just want to read like one GYG book that is somewhat easy to find, get this. Choose the dog route first. Awesome W right there. And one that I have to recommend, though I know like basically no one has, is One Night in Pain House. Now, dogs less in it than like something like Please Don't Feed the Vampire or The Barking Ghost, but this dog is in it for a pretty decent amount of time. I would say it's enough to make it feel worthy of being in this list of mine. And this is just a fantastic book. I got this for an extremely great price. I still cannot believe I got it. And boy, am I happy I did. Not just for its value, but for the love that I have for this book. This is one of the best Goosebumps books ever made, ever.
Two things. In my opinion, I think the Fifi storyline and Please Don't Feed the Vampire is actually the weaker storyline. And two, One Night in Pain House is absolutely goated. If you're looking for like basically a perfect give yourself goosebumps book, you can't go wrong with One Night in Pain House. Minus the true ending. I think that's a wet fart. But basically a flawless book nonetheless. It's one of the scariest Goosebumps books out there, period.
10 out of 10. Yeah.
Don't let the cover deter you with a little Pomeranian puppy. I mean, it's one of those that it has more bite than bark. So there you go. All right. Anybody else want to go next? All right. Let's pass it over to BD Horror. What are your favorite pieces of dog media that you brought to share?
So this was tough because dog media does not usually please me. I was one of those kids who was upset when Beethoven was on screen. Although maybe watching it again, I'll probably enjoy it more as an adult. And so far, there hasn't been much dog horror that's really pleased me. I haven't read Cujo yet, but so far I haven't read anything.
You haven't read Pet Store from Spine Tinglers either.
Yeah.
And that's arguably worse than both of what we just talked about.
However, there are two pieces of dog media that I do enjoy. One of them is comedy related and arguably the most iconic dog of all time. And then you have one which, if you watch my channel, many of you will know what one of my favorite kids' horror books of all time is right now. And it does have to do with the dog, and it was mentioned earlier. So first I'll talk about the comedic one. This one will be brief. Row Raggy, you know what it is. It's Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo has always been a great piece of dog media to me when they did the CGI live action and even when they did the cartoon. It's always been one of the most iconic characters. I always thought he's been funny. I always thought he's a great mascot to have for a cartoon. And I always like the stuff that they do with them. I like Pup Named Scooby-Doo. I like the different phases. And it's just a great show. There's a lot of great cartoon series for Scooby-Doo. The live action movies are funny and entertaining. So I would suggest you go check that out just for some comedy and some relief. However, the next one I will talk about is a 10 out of 10, one of the best kids' horror books I ever read. And it was actually the first book that I read of this specific Goosebumps knockoff series. I didn't know anything about it going into it. I didn't hear much opinions aside from Spongy highlighting it a little bit on being good. And that is Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried from Spine Tinglers. This is arguably, to me, one of the best kids' horror books of all time that I've read so far, and definitely my favorite dog story that I've read so far. For those of you who don't know about it, it's basically about a kid named Billy Baker. He's moved to this new neighborhood, and the opening scene is his dog dying in basically this doctor's lab when he takes it for a visit. And as the dog dies, this thunderstorm starts going off, and the lights flicker in the building, and he sees a glint of something within the dog's eyes that freak him out and sticks with him. And as he's mourning for his dog, let's just say his dog doesn't stay buried for too long, and there is revenge of the pets going on. There's a lot of people getting attacked, there's riots going on, and the final chapter to this book is the most realistic kids' horror ending I've read, where the ending and how stuff gets resolved is something that would happen in real life if you know how people are. And the ending, very ending of the book, is kind of a little bit like a slasher, right? Except not with the normal human villain, it's with something else. And I thought it was super dark, super sinister. If you want to read a great dog book, this one's terrifying. It's not strictly dogs, there are other pets in there, but yeah, super creepy, super terrifying, and arguably one of the darkest kids' horror books I ever read. It felt like I was watching a movie. I could see this adapted as a movie and doing well. So if you want to read a book that feels kind of cinematic in a sense with how the story's told, you should read Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried. And those are my choices.
Yeah, I remember the angle to it. There's like some cults in the story, which mild spoiler, you do not see that coming. And if you ever want to read a wild book in kids horror dealing with cults, read that. I've read it before. I really enjoyed it for the most part. So, while I don't think it's perfect, and I think Monster Blood would say that, if he was here, you know what he would say. But yeah, Spongy, me and you seem to be on the thumbs up bandwagon for that one. So let's pass it over to Alex, Goosebumps for Dummies. Do you have any dog media you want to share?
So I'm gonna cheat with this one. This is my first one. It's a Goosebumps book. It has basically nothing to do with dogs. Well, at least what the title is suggesting. Frankenstein's Dog. I reread it like 2 weeks ago. And there was dog stuff in there, but it basically had nothing to do with the book. But I thought those were some of the highlights of the book. They were very fun. There's a scene halfway through the book, minor spoiler, where a certain mixture gets dumped on a certain dog, and a certain something happens to that certain dog. Reverse shrink, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I guess. So, yeah, I thought it was very enjoyable for what the dog scenes were in that book, but spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with what the title suggests. There is no such thing as a Frankenstein's dog, but it was a pretty good book for being called a dog book, and probably my favorite dog slightly related Goosebumps book. For movies, I have one that's very loosely based on a dog, but the dog's basically the main villain of the book. Sorry, the movie. And I want to clarify something before I show this. I am not at all a sports fan, especially a baseball fan. I am not into sports like at all. Maybe basketball, but period, no sports. I'm not a sports fan. I'm talking about The Sandlot, which is a movie I have seen quite a few times in my life, and I recently rewatched it like in May, and I found the DVD recently. There will be a video about that soon where I show that, and a big thrift video, self plug there. And yeah, the villain of the movie is basically a dog, and I like the plot. This kind of message about it, because the dog seems to be very, very scary. Like he's gonna absolutely maul you to death, eat your kids, sneak into your house and eat all your food. Kind of like the barking ghost. The dog seems despicable. But the dog is actually just very, very friendly, which I really like. I really like that. So it has a nice message for being a movie very loosely based on a dog. And for one more, I'll be very brief on this because it's a horror movie, Cujo. I've never read the book, but I want to because the movie is fantastic. The plot is this mom and her son, who's very young, I believe, get trapped in a car on a hot day because there is a rabid dog outside, I believe a Saint Bernard, and there is blood, and it is very, very entertaining. For being little to no settings, it's just in the car for literally half the movie, but it's very, very good. And I really like it. But don't watch it if you're a little kid.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Cujo and when I was a kid, and that's kind of scarred me a little bit from like big dogs, and I had to grow out of that. I used to like watch Beethoven, and think about Cujo. I'm like, he's like the same breed, and I think the Sandlot dog kind of looked like the Cujo a little bit too. So, yeah, big dogs, yeah, they're pretty intimidating. um, I guess we have one last person, which is the ultimate Goosebumps man. But that I kind of have one more thing I want to bring up. A movie I watched a lot, See Spot Run. Guarantee you nobody's ever heard of it. As a kid, I was obsessed with the movie. Nowadays, I probably would hate it. It has David Arquette in it and the kid from Two and a Half Men. But yeah, I'll just leave it there. And if anybody in the comment section watching this wants to chime in on See Spot Run, go ahead. But yeah, Ultimate Goosebumps, man. What are your picks that you want to talk about?
All right. Well, one of mine is a Disney classic that I think probably all of us have seen at one point, 101 Dalmatians. I think that's just a really fun Disney movie, mainly for Cruella de Vil. Let's be honest, she's one of the most entertaining Disney villains of all time. And there's just a lot of fun stuff. I just like the movie overall, with all the fun slapstick and stuff that it has. Very like old cartoon-esque, which is really fun. And my other one, like BD said, Scooby-Doo. As you can see back there, I have my Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated poster, which is my favorite Scooby show, and my favorite Scooby-Doo movie, Zombie Island. This is like hands down my favorite piece of Scooby media of all time. It's dark, it's scary, probably like the most intense like kids animated horror you could see. It's just it's great all around. It's easily a very fun watch. Pretty much all of the direct-to-video Scooby movies from the 90s were great, but this is hands down the best one. So,
yeah, Zombie Island is goated. I think that and Cyber Chase are my two favorite ones. When I think about the Scooby-Doo movies, like the animated ones, those are the two I always want to watch.
You also have the one with the witch, which is actually surprising. They have the Salem witch trials.
which just goes. I also have that DVD in my collection. I just haven't watched it yet.
That one's super scary too.
Does Spongy have anything that he wrote for it? Did you see that?
No,
okay, so he didn't write anything. Spongy, if you're watching and you want to put something in the comment section of what dog media you like, feel free to do so.
And I did want to give a little bit of a shout out because I have not read this story, although I believe some people have. Dead Dogs Don't Fetch. I don't know for anyone who's read that what your opinions are. If you've read it, maybe let us know.
Dead Dogs Still Fetch. I have the video of it on my YouTube channel, the whole video story. If you want to watch it, it's only available in video form. But Braden Gardner, he's actually in the Discord with us. He was actually really helpful in getting that out there for us, and we're still really thankful for him providing that story because I was lost to time for many years, and so many people put hours and hours of like research into it, and luckily, shout outs to Jude DeLuca, managed to track him down. So history was made. And that's probably one of my favorite pieces of Goosebumps Lost Media ever discovered, which I think might be a fun topic for us to cover in like a solo podcast one time. Just talk about Goosebumps Lost Media or something. But that'll be a little bit down the line. So we have a couple episodes planned, which segues into this episode 8. Next time we have vampire horror, but we're going into a fun route because in a lot of ways, both of these kind of have notoriety in both, platforms that they run on. We're going to be looking at Goosebumps' Vampire Breath, time traveling vampires, versus Are You Afraid of the Dark's The Tale of Vampire Town, which is basically the kid version of Blade. So we'll be looking into that. See the balloons? I'm excited. The Tale of Vampire Town, I absolutely love it. And Vampire Breath has a heart-shaped piece in my own heart. I don't know why I said it like that, but you know what I mean. I love the story. I can't wait for us to discuss it. And we're gonna, for our discussion, talk about the coolest kids horror protagonists that we have found, or I guess our favorite ones. Which one we think is like, you know, the coolest kid? Because the typical trope in Goosebumps seems to be the nerdy, skinny type. So there's not a lot of cool kids written in Goosebumps. So we might have to pick some other ones from some other franchises to throw up there. But with that being said, thanks to everyone that tuned in to this podcast, and special thanks to the panelists here. I will put everybody's links to their stuff down in the description and in the comment section down below. You can go check out Minnesota Goosebumps Fan on his YouTube page, and Ultimate Goosebumps Man on his YouTube page. I think they're both on Instagram maybe as well. I'm not too sure. And then they also have a sister podcast called Goosebumps Crew. Like I said earlier on, I'm going to put a link for that new podcast that they're on in the description as well. Goosebumps for Dummies, you can find him on YouTube. He's pretty much right there with me at 1.5K subs. Congrats. We're both part of the 1.5K club. Nice. And then we have BD Horror. You can find him on Instagram and on YouTube. Guy's a legend. He makes a lot of shorts too. You'll see him make some fire shorts. You'll see a link for his stuff. And then Spongy, I'll put a link for Spongy's blog, Twitter page, and YouTube in the comments as well. So until next time, take care. Have a great night. We hope to see you next time, everyone. Peace.
See you guys.